Hello, everybody. My name is Marie O'Neill, and I am an evolutionary astrologer here in Santa Rosa, California. Welcome to this talk. Today, we're going to be talking about retrograde planets. Before we get started, what I usually like to do is find out from the audience who has retrograde planets in their chart and what are they?
Yes, I have retrograde Mercury. I have some outer planets as well, but Mercury is the one that I like to focus on. Yes, Sue, go ahead.
I have Mercury and Jupiter, both retrograde.
Okay.
Mercury for myself as well, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto.
Wow. That's amazing. Anyone else? All right. Well, the other thing that I like to do is, since you've given me this information, and thank you for sharing, what I like to do when I'm teaching any subject is I like to have the individual who is listening listen intuitively, but listen with their whole being and see how the information resonates with you. If you don't have a particular planet retrograde, that's fine. Maybe there's someone else, someone in your life who does, and you can see, well, is this information fitting that person? But specifically, I'm concerned with making sure that you have information that can help you, not only as an astrologer, but also help you individually. So let's go ahead and get started here. I've got so much information that what I'll probably do is read a lot with emphasis, hopefully, so that, let's see, where is it?
Down the bottom.
Oops, there we go.
That's it.
Got it. Okay, let's go. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. We're going to get started. Now, if you're looking at this particular screen, Earth is the third planet, of course, from the sun. And I liken Earth to, in this particular screen, as a fast-moving car. And the other planets are slower moving. When we're looking at retrograde, it's really an illusion. The planets are not really going backwards. They just appear to go backwards. So when you have oops, I need to go back. I love that. Hands are a little bit too quick. When you have two objects, say one object is closer to the inside of a circle and the other object is on the outer part of the circle, they may be going, the slower planet is going slower and it's on the outside, and the faster planet is going faster on the inside. At some point, the faster planet catches up with the slower planet, and at that point, as that faster planet is passing the slower planet, it gives the illusion that the slower planet is going backwards, when in fact it's not. In addition to that, we have the sun and the moon, which do not ever go retrograde. The reason is the sun has all of the other planets rotating around it, and the moon, of course, is rotating around the Earth, which is rotating around the sun. So it does not go retrograde. Let me just give you some more information here. I'm an information junkie. So when we look at planets, the planets are the what of the three symbolic systems. So with the planets tell us what part of our mind is being focused on. So with retrograde planets, of course, this is what we're talking about. The energy or expression of the signs is done through the planets. So let's move on to the next slide. This is another example of the retrograde motion, so that you can see that you have the sun and you can see the planet on the inside. As it catches up with the planet on the outside, it gives that illusion of going backwards. So we just talked about that, so I'll just move on. The next thing that we need to talk about is energy. This particular picture is courtesy of Alan Oken, who is an esoteric astrologer who I also study with. And it talks about where energy comes from. If we're looking at the galaxy, the ultimate energy is coming from the galaxy, from far, far away. It comes down through our solar system and is filtered then through the planets and the sign and then the human being. So when we're looking at, if we're looking at Mars, say Mars is the red planet, that particular energy is fiery. Well, there are 7 different basic energies out in the universe, and they're called rays. And each of those rays filters down from the galaxy through the solar system, through the planets, and each planet is resonating more or less with one or more of the particular rays. That's another big subject, the rays, which I'll talk about at another time, but let's move on. One other thing that we need to talk about before we start with the retrograde planets is stations, stationary planets. Here you see a pendulum of a planet. And a retrograde, a stationary planet, if you're looking at a pendulum, as it swings from left to right, when it swings to the left, before it swings to the right, it has to stop. That's considered a station. When it swings to the right and before it swings to the left, it stops again. That is a station. So we have stationary retrograde and stationary direct. People born during particular stations have a more intense energy with that particular planet. When we get Mercury retrograde, which happens more frequently than the other planets going retrograde, we get a station for Mercury going retrograde, and it usually lasts for a couple of days. When it goes direct, it does the same thing. It lasts for a couple of days, which means that the energy is really very intense. Let's move on to Mercury. Now, Mercury's orbit is 87.97 days. And it retrogrades anywhere between 19 to 24 days in each retrograde cycle. Usually it's 3 times a year, although sometimes we end up with Mercury retrograde 4 times, but usually it's 3. So Mercury turns retrograde more frequently than any other planet, but outer planets are retrograde more often than Mercury. Mercury can never be more retrograde than 28 degrees from the sun because it's locked into this orbit of the sun. And whenever it reaches its furthest distance from the sun, it changes directions. When another tidbit about retrograde planets are closer to the Earth, which is why they look like they're going retrograde, because they are closer to the Earth. So with Mercury, Mercury is, of course, a planet of communication, of intelligence. It's how we transmit information. So Mercury not only rules communication, it represents coordination also. So thought processes, ideas, and sensory information from both our conscious and our unconscious sources all need to be coordinated and understood. So Mercury analyzes, sorts, groups, makes sense of things. And so when we're looking at Mercury being retrograde at the birth, the thinking processes are generally more acute. This means that they're more intense. They're just not expressed outwardly. So the person's sense of humor might be a bit quirky because they've got all of this communication going on inside, and it's, so the outward expression can be a little bit more challenging. People with Mercury retrograde take in information differently than those with Mercury direct in their natal charts. There is about 18% of the population who have Mercury retrograde in their charts. So some people with this position struggle with doubts about their perceptions or their ability to learn. And there can be a lot of thinking, double checking, and reviewing of thoughts and ideas before they actually communicate them to the outside world. This is because the mind is turned inward. Therefore, outward communication can be a challenge. Not always, but it can be. When you have someone with Mercury retrograde, I like to give, or personally, I like to give antidotes or ways of coaxing out the jewels for someone with planets retrograde. And with Mercury retrograde, it's best to be patient and not talk over people who have Mercury retrograde in their chart, because they may need a little bit more time to express themselves and get their point across. And if they're being talked over, then they clam up or shut up and don't actually say what is in their mind to say. They do, or you can ask thought-provoking questions to these people, because usually they're going to come up with some fantastic answers that maybe you would not have thought of yourself. Give them time to ponder and before they answer. So now, individuals with Mercury retrograde, they are capable of tapping into the collective unconscious and of perceiving knowledge from prior lives. This process is done unconsciously. They don't know that they're actually doing it. Because the native may know more than they can consciously communicate, it's possible that frustration may set in. The person may become preoccupied with the form of the ideas, creating barriers to the essence of the knowledge. Creative outlets that require nonverbal communication, such as music, painting, are an excellent means of expression for people with Mercury retrograde planets in their Mercury retrograde in their chart. Many of our musicians, musical geniuses actually, have Mercury retrograde. And history is also a natural outlet for people with Mercury retrograde. So, and as I believe, and my mentor, Stephen Forrest, always says, there is no such thing as a bad planet. People with Mercury retrograde have it for a reason, and it's a good reason. A lot of times they are the geniuses in our world. So that's Mercury retrograde. Let's move on to Venus. Now, Venus takes 224.64 days to orbit the sun. It retrogrades every 2 years for 40 days. And here's something that you might not know also. Venus and the Earth have many similarities. Basically, their makeup is the material that makes up both planets are the same. Therefore, they're considered sister planets. However, Venus also has starkly different than the Earth in that its atmosphere, which is composed primarily of carbon dioxide and small amounts of nitrogen, is 92 times as dense as the Earth's. It's also the hottest planet in the solar system. When we're looking at Venus, we are looking at, of course, the planet of love and the planet of money. It's the planet of retraction, and she is typically harmonious. Therefore, she's seen as a peacemaker. She rules over the arts, sensuality, entertainment, money, romance, comfort. She's a stabilizing force. So she is about balance, of course, and she rules Libra and Taurus. When Venus is retrograde in the chart, the feeling body is inward. Therefore, the person might come across as being shy or awkward. They may have issues of self-worth, not feeling good enough, not pretty enough. The picture that comes to mind is someone meeting a potential mate and blurting out something inappropriate or not talking at all. They can act goofy. But they do feel very deeply. The emotions are felt deeply. Because they aren't expressing their feelings outwardly, they can be very creative and inventive. When Venus is retrograde, it also indicates or can indicate difficulty in expressing freely your love and affection for others. You may feel that you lack emotional fulfillment and tend to interpret life's events through the lens of how much am I loved or deprived of love. When coaxing out the jewels of Venus retrograde, you want to engage in all activities that add beauty, art, and love to your life. For the person you love who has Venus retrograde. Venus is the planet of beauty. Therefore, loving an animal can also be helpful. When you have Venus retrograde and you want to express outward, it's good to surround yourself with beautiful things, so that this will help you to feel more comfortable expressing what is in your heart to other people or to those that you care about. Let's move on to Mars. Mars, the god of war, who rules Aries. This is a planet of energy. It's energetic, planet of action and desire. It's the survival instinct. Someone has their phone off. Okay, there we go. Good, good. I thought the police were coming. Anyway, it is about the survival instincts and can be thought of as the leftover animal nature in man. So when Mars is the push that gets us going in the morning, it helps us to get out of bed, basically. And when it's retrograde, of course, the planet is inward. Therefore, the person can have anger turned inward on him or herself. It can be internalized. This means that the person can have health problems because the anger is not expressed. And, so you can have unexpressed anger and rage. There is a strong willpower with people with Mars retrograde. However, they may not assert themselves or they may act in a passive way because Mars is directed inward. There's a little bit of difficulty in expressing how you feel with the anger. So standing up for yourself or asserting yourself may be a challenge, as it can stimulate fears of being ineffective when Mars is retrograde. There might also be, the person might use roundabout ways of going after their desires. The desire nature is definitely there and it is deep, but often misunderstood by other people. Timing might be off with Mars retrograde, or you could express your desires or your anger in bursts rather than more flowingly, whereby you keep your feelings or these things to yourself and let them build up until you explode. The person may come on too strong some of the time and not strong enough at other times, often thinking of the better thing to say after the argument is over or long after. There you have no pressure. Competition can also unnerve a person with Mars retrograde, because you are usually better off setting your own pace than working on a schedule that others set for you. You might come up with very creative ways of expressing yourself physically as you mature, or you channel your energy into unusual but effective areas quite effectively. The person who has Mars retrograde may expand their energy into attempting to find people in the present who can symbolize those who fulfilled you in the past. When you're working with someone with Mars retrograde, or you have it in your chart, it's important that you have daily routine, something that you can do consistently day after day, and also get plenty of sleep, have a good nutritious diet, and lots of exercise. Exercise is actually the key for Mars retrograde. This will benefit the Mars person in being able to express themselves clearer. Now, with Jupiter, Jupiter is one of our benefic planets. It takes 11.8618 years to orbit the sun, and it is retrograde 120 days a year. Once a year, it goes retrograde. This is the planet of expansion. It's the Santa Claus planet. So whatever it touches, it expands, either for good or for ill. Doesn't matter with Jupiter. Jupiter is, of course, the thinking person's planet, and it's the guardian of the abstract mind. So this planet, it rules, of course, higher learning and bestows upon us a yin for exploring ideas. So luck and good fortune are associated with Jupiter. When Jupiter is retrograde in a person's chart, they have a different or unusual perspective on life. The belief system or the set of morals is a little bit different. They prefer, this individual prefers to learn by their own experience and reactions to them. So no one else can really tell them how to think about a thing because they want to experience it for themselves to come up with their own truths. Because they don't intrinsically have faith in being lucky, they're planners who worry about their future or consequences of their actions more than others. They may need to learn that they deserve what others might naturally feel entitled to. The question with Jupiter is always, how have you underestimated yourself? So they have a strong inner faith and may have an issue expressing emotions openly. When Jupiter is retrograde, it offers the opportunity for a highly spiritual incarnation. This person may seek their own truth, for the mundane and status quo is likely to leave them feeling discontent. They are a free spirit and cannot follow happily in the footsteps of others. Great wisdom and prophetic ability can be present, especially as the person attains spiritual maturity. Jupiter retrograde can bring many deja vu experiences to the person, and you can feel as though you're at home anywhere you are. With a person who has Jupiter retrograde to express themselves more in a Jupiter way, the person will likely find little value or meaning in much that our society regards or cherishes as traditions. The person incarnated to live out the richness of life, both outwardly and inwardly. Too strict an environment can result in inner restlessness and discontent that may cause the individual to be able to verbalize or to define. So know that you or someone you know with Jupiter retrograde needs to explore a variety of places, activities, philosophies, and to determine for the self, lasting significance for each. They need to enjoy the versatility and unique insights that they have. So that is Jupiter. Now with Saturn. Saturn is considered one of our benefics, but I don't like to think of it as a benefic. Its orbit is 29.5 years to orbit the sun. Goes retrograde once a year for 140 days. Saturn is, of course, the ruler of Capricorn. In Greek mythology, we had Kronos. I don't know if if many of you know the story of Kronos, who was one of the Titans, he was the father of Zeus, and he ate his children until his wife Rhea tricked him into swallowing a stone when Zeus was born. So through Saturn, we learn self-discipline, and self-respect. We learn to believe in our destiny. Saturn is also associated with fathers, authority figures, and in childhood, discipline, rules, regulations. When Saturn is retrograde, we are self-sufficient and have a storehouse of self-discipline and are usually loners. There can be more than usual experiences of guilt and self-doubt when Saturn is retrograde in the chart. Fears are internalized, and they might be the person might put on a brave face so that others don't see them as vulnerable. There can also be a strong fear of letting others down or of not fulfilling their responsibilities, essentially, or of making poor choices. Sometimes the childhood is either not disciplined at all, or there is an exorbitant amount of discipline that the child has to endure when there is Saturn retrograde in the chart. Saturn retrograde tends to function much like a strong Uranus. There can be it can be uncomfortable with overly orderly or disciplined life. People born with Saturn retrograde might feel especially anxious or nervous when they're in situations that call for protocol or etiquette. The other thing about Saturn retrograde that isn't there with the planets that we just talked about, this is a signal that you are redoing a lifetime. This incarnation is a second chance. Thus, you will feel the burden of dealing with two lifetimes at once. You can therefore experience inner doubts about your self-worth and your ability to overcome difficulties. The good news is that your soul knows that you have achieved the spiritual maturity required to redo successfully a lifetime. You have in prior lifetimes advanced through great personal struggles and sacrifices. Now, as you learn to flow with Saturn's discipline, you'll be rewarded with enormous wisdom. Saturn is comfortable in the retrograde motion. And as you flow with it, you develop the capacity to tap into all of your prior life wisdom and talents. Saturn retrograde is a sign of an old soul who has advanced far on the spiritual path. Now you have incarnated to perfect what you have learned. Coaxing out the jewels with Saturn retrograde, you are likely to possess a serious nature and feel overly responsible. So make sure that you have regular periods of play in your schedule. Self-discipline is important, which means that it won't be foisted on you by outside influences because you're already self-disciplined. Individual sports such as swimming, track, tennis can be helpful. Sewing, sculpture, anything that requires you to build something would be helpful with Saturn retrograde. So oops. Move to the next one. All right. Now we move on to Uranus retrograde. The orbit of Uranus is 84 years, which means it takes 84 years for Uranus to go around the sun. Its retrograde motion is between 148 and 155 days, once a year. With Uranus, this is, of course, the planet of individuation. At least the person is working to develop their individuality. So with Uranus, Uranus is the god of the sky and the heavens and the ruler of Aquarius. In astrology, the energies of Uranus are electric and crammed, concerning change. When Uranus is retrograde, things are falling off. I think I have too much here. Sorry about that. When Uranus is retrograde in the chart, because the person lives in their head, they are free to ponder truths. Their exterior life may look normal and conventional, but the person is truly unique in their thinking and can be a genius. Uranus retrograde can point to a fear of change or a latent mistrust of new technologies or improvements. These people may hide their eccentricities, while Uranus direct natives are more inclined to flaunt them, or at least to be proud of them. In some ways, having Uranus retrograde is like having Saturn strong in the chart. There can be pent-up energy with this position that while they may, how did I do that? I've got to go back. Sorry about that. Where is... Well, I've lost the mouse. Okay. With Uranus retrograde, it relates to a karmic family and societal difficulties. When a person has Uranus retrograde, their efforts to both relate to others and to reform their unconscious mind can be done. It can be transformed. Uranus retrograde can play havoc or wreak havoc with relationships because the person is so changeable, which can make the person appear hypocritical. They're not. They're just changeable. The person's mental and emotional bodies may struggle with each other, as the person may know that they need to do one thing while feeling that they need to do something else. So Uranus retrograde would have the person lift their consciousness above the emotional mental bodies and focus on the intuitive body. This is the best way to deal with Uranus retrograde. Coaxing out the jewels with a person with Uranus retrograde, you would need to appreciate your free-spirited self. And if you have someone with Uranus retrograde, appreciate them. Appreciate their free-spiritedness. Encourage this person's originality and inventiveness. Do not try to possess this person, and if you have Uranus retrograde, don't let yourself be possessed. Uranus retrograde is his or her own unique self and will rebel against all attempts to chain him or her. So let's move on to the next. Yes, Neptune, one of my favorite planets. Neptune's orbit is 164.8 years around the sun. It retrogrades once a year for 165 days, each retrograde. The meaning of Neptune is, well, the meaning of Neptune retrograde in a person's chart. They might tend to hide their vulnerabilities and their spiritual side, or they might even hide their compassionate nature as they feel somewhat uncomfortable expressing them. Doesn't mean they're not there, it's just a feeling of being uncomfortable with the expression of them. These things can, of course, very well exist, and they run very deep. But Neptune retrograde natives prefer to keep these things private. Deep faith can be there or not, but these people are naturally mistrustful because of prior lives. When they are left to fill in the blanks, they might expect the worst. There can be a big fear of dreaming too big a dream. So when we're looking at Neptune, this is where we work to let go of the ego that thinks this is all there is. And so it's where the conscious mind and the unconscious mind meet. This is where we're learning the function of to function intuitively. It's truly the stuff of dreams that dreams are made of. And Neptune being the spiritual planet, the person really wants to have their own spiritual identity, which is why there can be a mistrust of other spirituality, other spiritual organizations. When a person has Neptune retrograde, the reality of the outer world may not be obvious. This is because the psychic sensitivities are directed inward. The inner world is paramount, and the person may be misguided due to subjective factors. I like to think of people with Neptune retrograde is the person who sees others as they should be, not as they are. So Neptune retrograde gives the desire to unveil mysteries and to expose religious shams. The person may have an intuitive awareness of their subconscious mind, but may have difficulty making conscious attunement. Neptune retrograde attunes much easier to the subconscious/unconscious when the focus is diverted by the use of a tool, such as astrology, or while the conscious mind is occupied with the task at hand. It is therefore important to listen to and heed insights that appear to come to you from out of the blue. With Neptune retrograde, it indicates the urge to view the material world in terms of its significance to the soul and its growth. Therefore, Neptune retrograde offers the individual the opportunity to achieve a very advanced stage of spiritual evolution during this incarnation. Neptune retrograde requires that you live in the material world while remaining separate from it, which can be a challenge, but that is the task of Neptune retrograde. To others, you will seem to lack the common sense that motivates the behavior of others. Instead, you vibrate to a higher music, possessing a direct attunement with your soul. You are much more in touch with the cosmos than the material world and know far more than you can express in words. So Neptune retrograde, basically, you are living through karma basically of learning how to distinguish between the dreams that will bring true fulfillment and those that simply appear to do so. This learning process can mean that you attempt living one dream after another, because Neptune retrograde functioning on the personality-centered level can be confusing. You may tend not to trust your intuition, even though you are highly intuitive. So coaxing out the jewel with someone with Neptune retrograde, you may appear impractical in comparison to society's status quo. You may be tempted to stifle your dreams or to dismiss them as off the wall. Please know that you live in two worlds simultaneously. If you are friends with someone who has Neptune retrograde natally, simply be supportive of them and allow this person's uniqueness to manifest. The person, you or someone else who has Neptune retrograde, would enjoy serving others, even as a young child. Artistic and musical activities are also satisfying for a person with Neptune retrograde. So that is Neptune. And we will move on to Pluto, which is the god of the underworld. Pluto's orbit is 248 years around the sun, and it retrogrades approximately 150 to 190 days once a year. So with Pluto, of course, is the ruler of Scorpio, and Pluto helps us to discern truth and realize our destiny. It is the planet of transformation, and it is the father of the phoenix that rises. So that's enough on the meaning. Let's look at what it means when it's actually retrograde. People with Pluto retrograde in their birth charts may be more inclined to fear being controlled, manipulated, or betrayed by others than those with Pluto direct. There may be a tendency to keep these fears to themselves, as exposing them makes them feel vulnerable. They don't as readily let people know their desire for power or control, and might not be in touch with this desire at all times. There could be a fear of being disempowered, and the person may not speak their innate truths because of it. There can also be great humility. With Pluto retrograde, it turns the transformative energy even more deeply into the superconscious mind, bringing about an inner illumination long before the person is able to give it expression in the outer world. Pluto retrograde indicates a carryover of psychic powers from previous lifetimes. These powers are to be used in constructive ways only. The person may feel the struggle. They may feel the struggle of humanity, and they can feel it within themselves. They also may be aware and feel responsible for lifting the consciousness of humanity. With Pluto being retrograde, this is about a karmic debt that the person has that is owed to humanity, stemming from the age indicated by the sign in which Pluto is located. For example, if you have Pluto in Virgo, then you are looking at the age of Virgo. And ages last 21, I think it's 2100 years. There was the age of Taurus. And so for the person who had Pluto in Taurus, then it would, the age where the debt was incurred would be in the Taurian age. So the debt is to be paid through selfless service to humanity. Tremendous spiritual growth is possible. You have the opportunity to rise above the karma of the human race and step off the wheel of rebirth. Pluto retrograde joins Neptune retrograde in asking that you live in the world while remaining separate from it. Retrograde Pluto indicates that the individual was also suppressed in previous lives, usually or mostly by established political and social systems. The person could feel mistreated by the government, or maybe it was by the police, but it could be literally anything that can be described as the tight grip of the system. This could be even something faceless. The economic situation could be it. When you're looking at Pluto retrograde and you want to coax out the jewels with Pluto retrograde, you'll need to understand your psychic abilities and that they are natural to you, and not let them stifle you or hold you down. Instead, use them for constructive purposes and don't make a big deal out of them, because it's natural. It's something that you came in with. So that is a good thing. Now we have gone through the planets, the retrograde planets. I want to open it up for questions. Are there any questions that I can answer for you?
Hi. Yes, I have a question. Thank you. It was a very good presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I'm curious, can you speak on Chiron retrograde?
You know, it's interesting because I didn't do any research on Chiron. I was dealing mainly with the planets. But, you know, if we look at this logically, with Chiron being a wound, it's a wound that it's a wound that we will always heal or will never heal, but we need to look at it differently to actually work with it. And I guess I shouldn't say it, you never heal it. It's just that it turns into something that you can use for the benefit of humanity. With Chiron, my personal opinion of it is when it goes inward, it gives you the opportunity to do your own psychological or be your own psychotherapist with the Chiron, so that you can come up with your own ahas and your own breakthroughs with healing the Chiron wound. Because with Chiron, if we change the way we think about the wound, not that the wound actually completely heals, we just have to change the way we think about it, it then becomes the great gift that we're here to give humanity. And that could be giving it to your family, your loved ones, or your work. But having Chiron go retrograde, in my opinion, gives you a perfect opportunity to do the internal psychological work that you need to do to heal it, to heal yourself.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Marie. We have one more question, and I want to put a chart up on the screen. Could you please click on Stop Share at the top of the screen?
At the top of the screen, I certainly will. And you guys do see the information on how to contact me there.
Yes.
All right, perfect.
Okay. So,
Okay.
Carolyn, please go ahead. I'll bring your chart up now. Mhm.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Oh, good. Perfect. Big screen.
There. That's better.
Okay, perfect.
So I have Uranus stationary retrograde. Do I? When I looked it up on Astrology, it said stationary retrograde, but I don't see that it says stationary retrograde on this chart. So I
Doesn't
don't
mean that it's not, but it's definitely not showing up.
Okay, well, all I know, I had never noticed before.
Mm-hmm.
I've looked at Astrology before for sure, but if it is, what does that say? I guess I'm thinking karmically and this life. Uranus is also out of bounds, and I think I'm a little tired of the energy, of the intensity.
The intensity of Uranus?
Yeah.
How are you using it? How are you using the energy?
I guess I used to use it when I was teaching full time. I taught children who learn differently, and I was different with them, and it worked very well for their learning. I don't know right now that I am using it per se.
Well, it's automatic that you would be using it. It's just that you can consciously direct that energy, and if you choose not to consciously work with that energy, it's going to work unconsciously. And so it's better for you, especially since you're looking at third house of communication. Do you get some pretty intense downloads with?
Yes.
Yeah, I would think so. Are you writing?
I'm supposed to be. I'm writing a little bit more now. The information, the things I want to write are coming through. I'm not disciplined as decades ago. I sat at my desk for 2 months during one summer, and I made myself write every day for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I didn't write anything for the next 7 years.
Okay.
So I don't do well with white knuckle disciplining.
Right. I can imagine that you wouldn't. Not with Uranus, no. At the same time, there has to be, because you do have the signature for a writer or a communicator. It doesn't even have to be writing, sitting down and writing. It could be using a tape recorder to record your insights or your thoughts. But that energy has to be used because, number one, my goodness, this is something you came in with, because I'm looking at your South Node, and you've got the South Node there and also Mercury in the 7th house, with Scorpio, so in a trine there. So that's a really good aspect. And see, here's the thing with trines too. A lot of people believe that trines are good, and they can be. The problem with trines is we sleep through things because it's just so easy, and there's no compelling need to actually do anything with a trine. And my suggestion to you is to to find something you love. There are plenty of ways of communicating. Even if you go out and talk to the animals, that's communicating. But
Right.
you've got, because there's so much pent up energy inside you that really needs to be expressed.
I believe that karmically I've been wrapped on the knuckles for expressing myself. So I guess there's a fear of speaking out. Right now, a couple of times a month, I'm reading to a group of 3-year-olds from the local daycare.
Oh, good.
They're cool. They're very cool.
That's good.
And you got to be out there to keep their attention.
Yes, you do. And you enjoy that.
I like it. I
Okay.
didn't know I would, but I like it.
I like it. So what else? I mean, so is there anything that I can answer for you? Because with it being stationary, and even if it's not showing stationary on this particular chart, you saw stationary somewhere else, which means that it's very intense.
Yeah.
So it has to be used.
So really, the importance is what you've said, that I just have to use it.
You have to, or it'll drive you crazy. I mean, how do you sleep at night?
Half of a little blue pill.
There you go. There's my. You have your answer. You have to use it to stop taking the little blue pill.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that.
Okay, any other questions?
I had a question. Do you feel that retrograde, if you have a non-retrograde planet conjunct a retrograde planet, does that give a retrograde effect to that non-retrograde planet?
You know, it can. It actually can, because they're together and they operate together, and there can be like a push-pull situation there. You also have, there's another way that you can have a direct planet that gives, looks like it's retrograde, and that is in hard aspect. You know, oppositions and squares can make it, can make planets look like they are retrograde too. So yeah, absolutely. Yes, to your question.
So Marie, I had one final question for you, and it's probably quite difficult, but anyway, can you please explain how a planet goes retrograde by progression, and how sometimes it changes house? And what I would like to know is, it will stay there for the rest of one's life. That is what I don't understand.
Well, that's because with progressions, you know, progressions are a mathematical calculation rather than something that is actually happening in the sky. So with progressions, it's usually about 1 degree a year, give or take just a little scotch, depending on when you were born. And because of that, when you get, and actually there are planets, Mercury by progression, if Mercury goes retrograde by progression when you're a child, it stays retrograde for 3 weeks. And that's the equivalent of about approximately 21 years. So you can have Mercury going direct early in your life, 25, 30 years old. So once again, it's by progression. Progressions are not usually externally expressions of who we are. Progressions are internal, psychological expressions. It's how we feel. It's how we, it gives us that internal feeling of happiness or sadness. I know when I had Neptune go direct, my energy shifted internally. Therefore, the outward expression was, oh my goodness, I felt as though the clouds had been parted and I could actually outwardly express the spirituality that I felt inside. I don't know if that answers, does that answer part of your question?
Yeah, it does. It does. Thank you very much. That was very helpful.
Oh, you are welcome.
Thank you. So, Marie, we're going to wind down this meeting. So, thank you very much. It was very informative. And
You are welcome.
see you next time. And thank
Yes,
you from all of us.
perfect. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Marie.
Thank you.
Oh, you're
Thank
welcome.
you so much. Thank you.
You're
Love the
welcome.
presentation.
Thank you.
So, we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.